down, this ain't a joke.
What's the situation?
One armed suspect, one hostage taker, and one self-proclaimed warlock inside.
Jesus. Which one's the warlock?
Name's Jerry. Claims to be a level 22 spellcaster. So far he's thrown glitter, insulted the robbers' bloodlines, and started chanting in Elvish, we think.
All right, call SWAT, animal control. Hell, call a goddamn dungeon master if you have to.
Last warning, Gandalf. Sit down and shut up, and no more sparkly crap.
My name is Jerry the Warlock of Widdershins Hollow, bringer of bewitchments, breaker of lease agreements.
I swear if you say one more thing about ley lines, I will shoot you in your stupid bathrobe.
This is a cloak of arcane dignity, and it's very breathable fabric.
You know what else breathes? You. And that's about to be optional.
You dare threaten the wielder of the lost arts? Very well. You give me no choice. By the power of forgotten tongues and discontinued spell slots, I cast Mind Killer.
Oh, for
Got him. Headshot.
Well done.
It worked. The Mind Killer claims another soul. No need to thank me, citizens.
What just happened?
Another day, another realm secured. Tell your grandchildren you were saved by Jerry the Warlock, master of the glittering doom. Stand down, constabulary. Your presence is no longer required. The threat has been neutralized through arcane might and tactical brilliance. Mine, of course.
Here comes the warlock, Chief.
Ah, the lads in blue, late as usual, I see. Fear not, your humble arch-wizard has once again prevented catastrophe.
Should we tell him?
Nah, let him have it.
You're safe now, my people. As always, magic triumphs over malevolence. Tell the bards what you saw here today, and be generous with adjectives.
I really fucking hate that guy.
Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
And you have arrived in the frontal cortex of the Creep Street Podcast. Oh, yes, yes. That's right. We are diving straight into the goopy mess of the brain today. Because let me tell you, folks, for all the weapons there are in the world, all the knives, the guns, the bombs, sometimes it's your own mind that can be the most destructive asset. And that's exactly what we'll be talking about today. Because some say, folks, that the greatest mysteries lie in the farthest corners of space or in the crushing cold darkness of the bottom of the sea. But maybe the most unknowable realm isn't out there at all. Maybe it's inside our own heads. The human mind. Soft, squishy, malleable, and yet stranger than any alien star system or Lovecraftian trench that we know of. And in its farthest, shadowiest fringes in research of the human mind, things get weird, folks. We're talking people with legitimate mind powers. Call it telekinesis, call it psychic abilities, psychic blasts, and the terrifying possibility that the brain, under just the right pressure, might be able to kill without a knife, without a gun, just merely with thought. So buckle up, because this time we're talking about the monster that may be inside all of us. Today we're talking about
mind killers.
That's right. Now let me lobotomize you with my sources here. First, we got Mysterious Deaths and Strange Cases of People Who Could Kill with Their Mind by Brent Swanser at Mysterious Universe. An article at CBS News called Florida School Settles Bizarre Lawsuit over hypnotized students and suicides. And Anna Mary Bonus Kingsford, esotericist, visionary, hermetic mystic by Paradoxus at U.S. Grand Lodge Ordo Templi Orientis. Now, whew, that's a mouthful, folks, and that's exactly where we're headed, because you're about to get a brainful here. So let's start off with our first character of the night, and by character, this is a real person, is what I mean. Let's rewind the clock all the way back to 1846, to the quiet cobblestone streets of Stratford, Essex, in the UK, where a pale, sickly young girl named Anna Bonus came screaming into the world. She was the 12th child in a wealthy English family, a household that had all the trappings of Victorian comfort, lace curtains, polished silver, and apparently one severely clairvoyant daughter. You see, Anna wasn't like the other kids. She wasn't like the other girls, She liked football. She liked dick jokes and farting. But for real, while most children were outside playing with sticks and catching a touch of cholera, Anna was inside, bonding with animals and predicting the deaths of family members like she was flipping through tomorrow's obituaries. Well, one relative called her a, quote, born seer, saying she spent most of her childhood locked away in her father's massive library, not because she was being punished, mind you, but because that's where she wanted to be. While the other kids were out climbing trees, Anna was devouring ancient, esoteric texts, like some sort of eldritch goth child. By the age of 13, she'd already written a novel called Beatrice, a tale of the early Christians. Bold for a 13-year-old's book topic. But Anna's interest didn't stop there at literary overachievement. As she grew older, she turned her attention to something darker, the occult. She studied spiritualism under Miss Florence J. Theobald down in Hastings, where she began participating in seances and mediumship like it was afternoon tea. She wasn't just dabbling. Anna Bonus was diving headfirst into the other side like it was her destiny. And according to some, this is how she found that with her own mind, she may have the power to kill. Now, as Anna grew into adulthood, her curious little mind didn't slow down. It just got louder, sharper, and more determined to claw through the veil of polite Victorian society. She continued to write. Words were her way of expressing herself and understanding the world, and she wielded them with precision. Eventually, she bought an actual journal called The Lady's Own Paper. It sounds delicate, like a publication where you'd learn about embroidering a pillowcase, but under Anna's hand, it became something closer to a literary seance. She dove headlong into theosophy, the spiritual, philosophical movement that sought divine truth through mystical means. But Anna, no, she wasn't content to just write about it. She wanted to embody it. She became a feminist, a vegetarian, and a firm opponent of vivisection. And in 1873, she did something almost unthinkable. She enrolled in medical school in Paris. And let's be honest, in the 19th century, a woman getting her higher education in medicine, of all things, well, this was very impressive. And in many ways, it was quite scandalous as well for the time. More than anything, though, it was Anna. It was exactly who she was since the day she was born. Honestly, as I was doing my research, and I was researching Anna, all I kept thinking about was Wednesday Addams. As the farther we go into this story, you'll see she is like the embodiment of Wednesday Addams. It's so funny. Now, she didn't do this for prestige. She did it to fight the system from the inside, to gain the scientific footing to dismantle cruelty with cold, hard facts, especially when it came to the butchery of animals in the name of science. But as you can imagine, Victorian medical school was not built with someone like Anna in mind. She wasn't just swimming against the current. She was swimming against the establishment in a lead dress as the establishment shouted at her to get out of the wave pool. Because here's the thing. Back then, women couldn't become medical doctors, period. But Anna didn't need a degree to prove that her mind was a force of nature. She was already bending the world to her will, and according to some, maybe even bending reality itself. Now, despite being an anomaly in a tight-laced Victorian world, Anna wasn't just getting by, she was excelling with high marks. She was, as they say, kicking ass in Latin. But there was one part of the curriculum she could never reconcile. One grim rite of passage that every medical student was expected to face without blinking. Dissection. And worse, vivisection. To her professors, it was science, but to Anna, this was torture and murder. It wasn't some Victorian woman in need of a fainting couch. It wasn't like that, like she was just so frail and the sight of blood. No, this was a moral agony for Anna. A spiritual offense in the cruelest of ways. Hearing the cries of the anesthetized animals didn't just haunt her. They hollowed her out. And she didn't stay silent about it either. No. Anna spoke out against the practice with passion. She even did what could only be described as the most goth, spiritually defiant move in the history of medical academia. She offered herself up for dissection in place of the animals. Very Wednesday Addams, if you ask me. Imagine that, a room full of stuffy 19th century men in their stiff collars and bloody aprons, staring at this pale young woman offering her own body in place of a rabbit's. But no matter how passionate her pleas, her words fell on deaf ears. No one would listen. No one cared. The knives just kept cutting, and it broke her. The sounds, the smells, it became absolutely unbearable. And in this dark moment, something was about to awaken within Anna. In her mind, there was no greater demon in a white coat than Professor Claude Bernard. To the rest of Europe, Bernard was a titan of physiology, a pioneer in experimental medicine, but to Anna, no, this bastard was a butcher in formal wear. This dude didn't just advocate for vivisection, he romanticized it, glorified it, preached its necessity like a zealot dripping blood from his sleeves. And Anna despised him on a spiritual level. She once said she couldn't even stand to breathe the same air as that man. And then came the day that would change everything. December 1877, a cold gray afternoon, Professor Bernard was delivering a lecture on thermoregulation. Pretty dry stuff, of course, until he described in great detail how he had slowly baked living animals to death, all in the name of science. The room was silent as the students scribbled their notes. Some nodded along, a few smiling. But Anna just couldn't take this shit no more. She stood up, shaking, and she screamed, "Murderer!" The class was gobsmacked at her outburst. Anna stormed out of the room like a raging bull, but not before she whispered something under her breath. Later, Anna claimed that in that moment she conjured up what she called a, quote, spiritual thunderbolt, a weapon conjured of her own pure will, launched from the depths of her psyche and aimed directly at Professor Bernard's chest. As she exited the building, she collapsed to the ground. A few days later, Claude Bernard was dead. There were no wounds, and there was no explanation. Europe's top physiologist suddenly struck down by a mysterious illness that took him quick. A psychic kill shot from a pale young woman. Anna had discovered something terrifying. The human mind, one like hers, might just be more dangerous than the scalpel. Regarding his death, Anna had this to say.
Woe to the torturers! I will make it dangerous, nay, deadly, to be a vivisector. It is the only argument that will affect them. Meanwhile, thank God the head of the gang is dead.
Well, after Professor Claude Bernard crumpled under the weight of this mysterious illness, Anna Bonus, she didn't mourn, she celebrated. In her mind, the spiritual thunderbolt had landed true to its target. And her next target was Dr. Paul Burt. If Bernard was the high priest of vivisection, Paul Burt was his crusading lieutenant. Anna called him, quote, the most notorious of the vivisecting fraternity, which, to be fair, sounds like an awful fraternity. I wouldn't pledge there. She didn't just disapprove of Bert's methods, she saw him as a sworn enemy in her psychic holy war, just as she did Bernard. And like before, she claimed to draw from the furnace of her own will to conjure another one of those spiritual thunderbolts like she was Zeus himself. And boom, sent it streaking through the ether. Well, November 1886, Dr. Paul Burt dies, a.k.a. Dr. Paul Blart, because every time I was doing these notes, I kept saying that accidentally, so f*** it, I'm just going to include it. And his death, it came suddenly with no warning. Once again, the medical establishment could only shrug. They had no explanation other than that bodies simply fail and illnesses that maybe come quickly and leave just strike. That's life, true. Anna, she saw in his death a confirmation, a cosmic vindication proving she was right and that they weren't just wrong, they were damned. To her, this was not a coincidence, it was a divine cause and effect. Righteous fury converted into psychic firepower. And if you were cutting open animals without anesthetic, you had better start sleeping with one eye open, 'cause Anna would be coming for you. And she would claim, quote, I have killed Paul Burt, as I have killed Claude Bernard, as I will kill Louis Pasteur, and after him the whole tribe of vivisectors. It is a magnificent power to have, and one that transcends all vulgar methods of dealing out justice to tyrants. But folks, even righteous fury has its limits. With 2 notches already carved into her psychic hit list, being Claude Bernard and Paul Burt, Anna Bonus set her sights on the crown jewel of French science, Louis Pasteur himself. He was a titan of microbiology and a father of vaccine science. The man whose very name you may now associate with milk and cheese not being a game of Russian roulette every time you took a bite of it. Which is, I guess, where the whole Pasteur, I think that's where that comes from. He helped develop that science.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. But for Anna, he was just another butcher in a white coat. Another unfeeling hand plunging a knife into a terrified animal under the noble guise of progress. And so in November of 1886, she made her move. She set out for Pasteur's Paris laboratory with every intent of conjuring one last thunderbolt, one final strike in her crusade against cruelty. But this time, nature struck first. A brutal, bitter rainstorm swept in. Anna, as we know, was never a picture of health, was caught in this downpour. Drenched, frozen, and frail, she fell ill. What started as pneumonia spiraled into tuberculosis. Her body, which was always sickly before, simply began to fail her. Ironically, though, Pasteur did fall gravely ill during this time, suddenly and mysteriously. But his was a near miss. He pulled through. He recovered and went on to live another 9 years. But Anna never got the chance to finish what she started. On February 22nd, 1888, Anna Bonus died the seer, the self-proclaimed psychic avenger, was laid to rest. And with her, whatever secrets or powers or delusions she had vanished into the cold soil. Whether Anna Bonus truly had the power to kill with her mind or simply lived in a fever dream of grief, conviction, and coincidence, one thing's for sure. For the enemies of mercy, she believed herself to be judgment incarnate. Now, before I move on, I wanted to read from this theosophical website. I'm not reading it verbatim, but they, coming from the same lineage as Anna, paint her in a better light. Not that I obviously don't agree with the animal thing, like I agree with her there, but just this is how they saw her, essentially. A 19th century mystic, feminist, anti-vivisectionist, and full-throated enemy of passive spiritual channeling, Anna Bonus Kingsford didn't just dabble in esoterica, she practically cracked it open with a stiletto heel and served it on bone china. She was one of the first women in Europe to earn a medical degree, and she did it just to sharpen her claws in the fight against animal cruelty. While others played the part of armchair philosopher, Anna went to the front lines in a corset and conviction. Though she converted to Catholicism, she treated organized religion like a buffet. Take what nourishes, leave what's spoiled. Alongside her fellow mystic, Edward Maitland, Anna spun up a vision of Christianity refracted through mystic revelation, planetary archangels, and Hellenic deity cosplay. The result was a deeply personal gospel dubbed The Perfect Way, a manifesto for those who think Jesus was swell but needed more cosmic geometry. Anna's Hermetic Society lit the kindling for what would soon erupt into the Golden Dawn, the most theatrical of magical fraternities. S.L. McGregor Mathers, W.W. Westcott, and even Aleister Crowley all tipped their hats, perhaps begrudgingly, to her spiritual way. Crowley even claimed she was the reason that theosophy took root at all, calling her the John the Baptist to his beastly Messiah. And when Anna talked about meeting the divine, she didn't just mean in prayer, she claimed full knowledge and conversation with her holy guardian angel, documented in writing so sacred, her editor refused to change a single word. She saw the Christ not as a lone historical figure, but as a repeatable spiritual event, one accessible through discipline, vision, and perhaps a side of lentils. Her angels bore the names of Greek gods. Her divine spoke in terms of attraction and repulsion, and her apocalypse came with a timetable. 1881, she claimed, was the start of a new eon, the Age of Michael. And if that all sounds a little familiar to fans of Thelema and the OTO, that's no accident. Her ideas trickled down through occult pipelines to the very bones of modern magical orders, both sacred and strange. But for all her fire, Anna's health was frail, and near the end, as illness gnawed at her, she wondered aloud if she had arrived too early for the revolution she foresaw. Maybe the hour had not yet come. Maybe she'd have to come back and finish what she started. And maybe she already has. So there's a little different look at Anna. I wanted to because I knew her dealings with theosophy and its connection to Aleister Crowley. So I wanted to kind of add that in there, that you knew it wasn't just some random woman. This was someone who was a prominent figure within the esoteric world. So very interesting stuff. What do you think? I mean, it might be the case for all the stories we covered tonight, but I mean, they say lightning doesn't strike twice or whatever. I have to think coincidence is the same thing. Like, I get it if the coincidence happened just right with the first guy, with Bernard, but then she does it again with Bert. And even though she's not successful with the third guy, he still did get pretty sick, even though he recovered. And notice that she collapsed that first time. It was almost like she was so filled with anger and sadness and rage that whether she had this ability or not, it's almost like she did conjure a sort of a jolt at this man in a way that sort of, did whatever it did to him. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, no, that was exactly what I was thinking too, is just too consistent to be a coincidence, I guess. And also, if we just take her words and we assume she's giving actually her experience, then yeah, I think that's definitely relevant too, that she felt like she shot something out into his chest. And then after that, she faints. And then later on, a few days, whatever, he dies. That on its own is pretty remarkable as well. So, it seems as though, she's not somebody who's telling a lie, that she's making this up. It seems like this is her honest interpretation of abilities she believes she has.
Right. And I mean, honestly, who knows? But the fact that she fainted after that first time, it almost implies that it took so much of her energy to do it that she collapsed. And because think about the third guy, she got sick. She got caught in that storm before she could he still got sick, but didn't die. So it's almost like, was she not able to give it the juice, you know what I mean, that she did in those first two times.
And if we're talking about a psychic killer, that kind of implies that whatever it's doing is on a psychic level as well. So maybe some people are more resistant to it. There could be that element as well, which is why he got sick, but he ultimately got better. And it could also be that it's like anything, it's a muscle you kind of exercise. And so, yeah, maybe took it all out of her that first time. And that's why she fainted, because it was like a muscle she'd never used before. And maybe using it more, she was able to become more powerful. Who knows? But certainly it seems like a possibility.
It's kind of like, do you remember at the beginning of the very first X-Men movie, when the young Magneto gets separated from his family in that concentration camp?
Yes.
And it's that sadness and rage that he bends the bars of the gates. It's almost like that, this moment of such pain and anguish and rage that she's able to, at least in one moment, able to, kind of like how those stories you hear of like a mother lifting a car to save their child that's like in that moment they have.
Comes from a need.
Right. It comes from a need. Right. Maybe it's something along that lines, is in moments of those dire moments, we are able to maybe, and it's obviously you can, adrenaline, all that stuff too, but maybe there's something in ourselves we're able to access that we usually can't.
Yeah. That would make sense. And the emotional component to me makes a lot of sense too. If we're talking about an ability that somehow you're tapping into something supernatural, well, that's kind of a concept that's tied so much together that we've talked about on this show. A great emotional moment, a tragedy, trauma, something like that has the power to like cause a haunting, or like a person's spirit stays behind. I mean, it seems conceivable to think that a psychic supernatural ability would be the same in that respect.
Right, absolutely. Now, this next tale is one that is equally as fascinating in a totally different way. Folks, the story you're about to hear, it starts off tragic, but not unusual, unfortunately. It concerns a man, a woman, and an unfortunate suicide. Heartbreaking, yes, but not supernatural. At least, not at first glance. Now, the focus of this story is a man named Louis Bowdy.
Bowdy, Nowdy.
That's right, Nowdy Bowdy. Well, Bowdy was a wealthy New York businessman in the early 1900s. He was refined and respected, and the kind of man, who wore cologne that probably smelled like tobacco and mahogany, that sort of guy. He married a young woman named Bertha Sayer in 1903, and the two seemed genuinely happy. Well matched, no scandals, just a classic portrait of matrimony in the Edwardian era. But then came February 18th, 1904. Bertha was found dead from a gunshot wound to the head. And next to her, a note, short and cryptic, that read this: "I've killed myself because of something I could stand no longer." Now, that kind of vague farewell is exactly how ghost stories and conspiracies get started. She gave no explanation other than that there was just something she could no longer live with. So the authorities chalked it up to some sort of personal torment, maybe a undetected mental illness, marital strife, maybe a little bit of everything. But at the time, no one looked any further. No eyebrows were raised, as of yet. Louis Bowdy was, by all accounts, devastated, of course, by the loss of his wife, Bertha. He was grief-stricken, yes, but as time moved on, so did Louis. And he would remarry again a woman named Rose. Now, let's be clear, too. This wasn't some loveless rebound. Friends said they were truly happy, him and Rose, inseparable even. Rose was warm-hearted, intelligent, a social butterfly that everyone enjoyed spending time with, and Louis was absolutely smitten by her. For a while, it seemed like maybe that first tragedy had been just that, a singular, unfortunate tragedy. The kind you move forward from, even if you never fully move on. But then came December 10th, 1908. It started when the neighbors began to smell something. Something not right. A thick, noxious gas was wafting from the couple's apartment. Like there was some kind of a gas leak. Eventually, they had no choice but to break the door down, and they found a scene that felt more like a ritual than it did a suicide. Rose was slumped on the floor. The gas stove had been turned on full. And in the bed nearby lay Louis, unconscious, barely breathing. He would survive, and Rose would not. And thus, another wife dead. But this time, there was something else. In the days leading up to her death, Rose had confided in friends, and what she told them was pretty chilling. She said that when Louis looked at her, like really looked at her, she felt an overwhelming, inescapable sense of dread. A sinking feeling like a weight pressing down on her chest. Like the room just went cold. Like something was standing behind her. She told her pals plainly, quote, "I don't think I can stand it much longer." And then she was gone. So 2 wives now. 2 wives dead by their own hand, both married to Louis. And in both cases, the trigger was not a weapon, but a look. By 1910, Louis was ready to try again at the game of love. This time, the lucky lady's name was Leona Violet Connolly, a 23-year-old widow who was young, beautiful, full of life. Louis, perhaps not wanting to taint the budding romance, decided to omit a few small details from his past, like how both of his previous wives had died under deeply strange circumstances. Yeah, he kind of swept that one under the rug, minor stuff.
That's a pretty big red flag.
It is.
Makes sense. He was never going to reveal that.
Right. Now, to the outside world, they looked like the perfect pair again, especially if you didn't know Louis's history. But then again, the first 2 marriages looked perfect as well. But just months into the marriage, something began to unravel. One evening, without warning, Leona left the apartment, not leaving a note and not even taking her coat. She wandered several blocks through the New York streets until she reached the 110th Street station. And there, she tried to throw herself in front of an oncoming train. But fate, it seems, hadn't yet punched her ticket. A bystander thankfully intervened at the last moment and pulled her back from the edge. When police questioned her, her answer wasn't what they expected. There was no talk of despair or hardship, no heart-wrenching grief or infidelity, not even a mental breakdown. And instead, Leona simply said, "I don't know why. Being near him, I suddenly felt like I had to die. like something in him was pulling me into the dark. She couldn't explain it, but she didn't have to. The numbers spoke for themselves. Old Lewis was 2 for 3 when it came to dead wives, and it was almost 3 for 3. 2 were successful in doing so. One marriage Lewis tried to keep out of the public record and out of the newspapers because even in 1910, 3 dead wives to your name was bad press. Leona would later describe this strong urge, saying, "I do not know what the impulse was that was urging me on to self-destruction. It was absolutely irresistible. I could not fight against it. I tried to, but something seemed to urge me on, and when he came home last night after several days of absence, and I had seen him for a few hours, the impulse was stronger than ever. Then I sent him away and followed out of the house myself, determined to finish it all." After her rescue at the train station, Leona didn't waste time. She left Lewis for good, fearing that bizarre gravitational urge to end her life might return if she stayed near him. Lewis, for his part, was devastated. But more than that, he was convinced that he was cursed, that something in him, something he couldn't name and had no control over, was causing the women he loved to spiral into desperation. As far as we know, there was no cruelty or abuse or betrayal, but by simply looking at them, he came to believe his gaze itself was fatal. And I just wanted to say, let's take him at his word. Let's say that this was not something intentional. Was he some kind of an unknowing emotional vampire, or a psychic vampire, which is something we'll do an episode on in the future, but if we believe that he had no reason. And think about the second wife. It appeared as though he tried to take his life with her. He was found in the bed, barely alive, barely breathing. I don't know if maybe he came home, found her dead, and then just laid down to die with her. They don't explain it, but it makes it seem as though he wanted to die too in that moment.
Yeah, which maybe that was just the absolute heartbreak of the moment of his second wife taking her own life again. But yeah, I mean, as far as the gaze goes, the vampire is the only thing I've ever heard of like that, right? That has that kind of intense power just by looking at you. So it could be something like that. Either way, it's really sad for this guy if he's actually telling the truth and that he just didn't know he had this power and was accidentally, causing his wives to kill themselves. Or maybe he's just got those baby blues.
I guess. And it literally gives you the blues when you look at him. I mean, like we said, obviously, given the time, and this is over 100 years ago, I mean, who knows? Obviously, he could have been behind the scenes and awful, and they just didn't want to say that. But if we go by his word, I mean, yeah, it's almost like he's cursed. So sometime after Leona had left, Lewis quietly checked into a hotel in Mamaroneck, New York, using an assumed name. And alone in that rented room, he turned a pistol on himself and joined his first 2 wives. Now, here's the unsettling part. None of the women who fell under Lewis's gaze had any known history of suicidal thoughts before. They were, by all accounts, happy and in happy marriages, stable lives until Lewis, whatever special sauce he's dealing with, until they came into contact with that. So what is it? Is this literally, like the first story, coincidence? Or is this a cluster of hidden traumas and tragically bad timing? Or something darker and intangible? Some presence or aura that lived inside of Lewis and reached out through his eyes like fingers? If that's true, it would make him a kind of psychic reverse Orpheus. He's doomed not by looking back, but by looking too long into the eyes of someone he loved. That is such an interesting story.
It really is. And now I'm kind of thinking, what if he had the same ability as Anna Bonus, and he just didn't actually know it, and maybe he wasn't even able to control it consciously?
Right. Absolutely. Maybe he didn't even realize what he was doing. You're absolutely right. Ooh, just had to take a quick pause there, Creep Street, just to give your poor palpitating heart a rest. If you're enjoying this episode, go ahead and follow us on Facebook, Instagram at Creep Street Podcast, Twitter at Creep Street Pod, TikTok at Creep Street Podcast. That's right. And if once a week is not enough for you, just head on over to patreon.com for all sorts of goodies. We got 3 different tiers there, something for every tier. So get your fixins. We even got a free tier where you can listen to the weekly sketches before they go live on the episode. Now, without further ado, back to today's story. Well, let's move on now to our next tale. Let's jump to November 1909 in Somerville, New Jersey. The kind of town where the biggest mystery on a Tuesday was who stole Old Man Dewitt's pickled eggs. But on this particular night, the town would gather for something a little more exotic. A traveling magician and hypnotist calling himself Professor Arthur Everton. And folks, it's important to know that the professor part was in quotes. It was a stage name, let's say. The guy was not teaching algebra, right? Soon he'd be teaching death. This, of course, was the golden age of mesmerism, when hypnotism wasn't just seen as a party trick or self-help therapy, but as a strange, semi-magical power that could unlock the hidden rooms of the human mind. Or if you were unlucky, trap you in one as well. Everton took the stage in a flurry of velvet and prestige and asked for a volunteer, a brave soul willing to test what he called the limits of suggestion. That's when John Simpson stood up to volunteer. John was a 35-year-old man who worked as a streetcar conductor, and judging by his unsteady gait and vocal enthusiasm, he was a few pints of ale deep. Simpson was heckling Everton all the way to the stage. He didn't believe in hypnotism, thought it was all hooey. All that liquid courage had turned into liquid douchery for Simpson. He slurred his words, something about
not being afraid of magic hands,
and dared Everton to, quote,
do his worst.
Well, the ever-stoic Everton smiled politely. He was happy to oblige the fellow. And then, right there under the gaslights, he did just that. What happened next would leave a man in a trance for nearly a week. And that was the least strange part of this tale. When a drunk skeptic climbs on stage during a magic act or any sort of production, they're asking for trouble. And in John Simpson's case, he found trouble he wouldn't be waking up from. So there John lay, slumped on the floor of a community theater stage, one shoe off, face pale, eyes glassy, wife probably humiliated. A man who went from drunken heckler to a hypnotized corpse in under 20 minutes. Professor Arthur Everton stood frozen next to him. The longer Johnny stayed in that trance, the more sweat gathered on Everton's brow. By this time, he's probably already eyeing the nearest exit. And as this was 1909, EEGs and brain scans and even reliable CPR was not there to intervene. If a guy passed out cold and didn't flinch after being slapped a few times, well, people just sort of guessed. And this night looked like death. So the police were called, and while they weren't exactly buying hypnotic homicide, they also couldn't explain what they were looking at. Because here's the thing, Simpson's body was warm. His muscles were not stiff, but he wasn't breathing. He wasn't blinking. Just wasn't there. So they did the only thing that made sense at the time. They called in another hypnotist. Enter one William E. Davenport, stage mesmerist and rival showman, and now apparently a freelance emergency responder, a sort of hypnosis EMT.
He's an ESP EMT.
Exactly. And I also just love not only is Everton probably sweating right now because he's like, oh, Jesus, God, this looks awful. But then one of his rivals comes to get him out of a jam. So I'm sure it's like an extra level of like, oh,
Yeah. It's like Tom Brady having to give Peyton Manning a call, see if he'll be the backup quarterback for the playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. So Davenport arrives. He takes one look at Simpson and mutters, "He's not dead, but he's not alive either." Which is really kind of a weird and unhelpful thing to say, but his theory was that Simpson was struck in a cataleptic state, an ultra-deep, unshakable trance. This was not sleep or a coma, but something in between, a psychological limbo where the mind shuts off, the lights go out, and perhaps even an astral plane of some sort. So naturally, Davenport does what any responsible hypnotist would do, and he sets up shop next to Simpson's body and tries to talk the man out of it. Well, what happened next would stretch the boundaries of medicine and belief itself. Because Simpson wasn't just refusing to wake up, he was fading. So there they all stood, the body of John Simpson slumped in the theater like an unplugged marionette. Everton sweating bullets, as you can imagine. And like I said, I'm sure it doesn't feel good for another hypnotist to be called to clean up your shit. Davenport was muttering affirmations to a corpse, and still no pulse, no breath, just the growing suspicion that something very weird had just taken place on stage. Davenport tried everything, counting backwards, commanding Simpson to, quote, breathe, snapping his fingers, clapping his hands. He even tried jolting his heart with hypnotic suggestion. Should have gave Anna Bonus a call. But still, with all that, he got nothing. And eventually, the grim reality could no longer be denied. John Simpson was dead. And so Everton was arrested for the crime of manslaughter. An accidental death, maybe, but still a death. Not by his hands, but maybe by his words. But the story didn't end there because the autopsy told a drastically different tale. In this story, we at least get a little bit of insight. Turns out what Simpson had died from was a ruptured aorta. And the cause was possibly an undiagnosed aneurysm, one waiting silently inside his chest like a ticking biological time bomb. A time bomb that just happened to go off at the worst moment possible for Everton, right as he told Simpson to sleep. Now, on paper, that cleared Everton. Of course, he had nothing to do with it. The coroner ruled it accidental, not the cause of some psychic murder. But then again, the guy dies mid-trance while under the influence of a man he heckled in front of a crowd. So take out any supernatural element that there may be, and just consider once again, like the first two stories, the coincidence of that happening. It's staggering. In fact, for it to be a coincidence is almost magical within itself. Or did Everton, wittingly or not, actually reach into Simpson's mind? I'm assuming he didn't mean to because he's a stage magician. He knows performance. So I'm assuming he thought he was doing something.
I'm sure, because also he's doing it in front of an audience, and as he found out, he became the prime suspect at first. So I'm sure he didn't do it intentionally.
Right.
Unless, I guess, he did it knowing he'd get away with it, I suppose.
And then again, let's talk about the emotion thing like we did earlier. Here's a professional. The last thing, I've been on stage countless times, and there's nothing worse than some jackass. You can understand why, even though he didn't intend to do it, on the inside, Everton's thinking, I wish this guy would just drop fucking dead.
Right.
Because he's being belligerent. He's ruining the show. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. I think every comedian with hecklers has probably felt that at some point.
Exactly.
This motherfucker just shut up and drop dead.
Just drop fucking dead.
This motherfucker dropped dead.
Fucking dead.
Dead.
Right. So did Simpson unintentionally somehow pull the wrong wire? Did he merely trigger what was already there and simply lit the metaphorical match? Some say Simpson's death is proof of the brain's power to override the body, while others say Everton was hiding a darker talent. But whatever the truth is, one thing is for sure, The night John Simpson dropped dead on stage was the night Hypnosis crossed the line from a party trick to a possible weapon. And the only one who knew for certain was lowered into the ground with his secrets still intact. So if you ever needed a textbook case of the devil made me do it, this was it. Now to our next story. We have two more here. We take you to Sumner County, Kansas, 1894, where we meet one Thomas McDonald, a hardworking, God-fearing farmhand, who found himself on the receiving end of a nasty rumor. Word was that a man named Thomas Patton had been dragging McDonald's wife's name through the dirt. What was said exactly, no one can say for sure, but it was bad enough that it got McDonald steamed. Furious, he stormed home in a rage. And waiting for him there was a man named Anderson Gray. Gray wasn't just McDonald's boss, and he wasn't just a wealthy landowner. He was also, of all things, an amateur hypnotist. Now, this is where things get dicey, because Gray had his own grudge with Patton. Some legal battle brewing between them from a while back, and on that fateful day, well, Gray allegedly used his special skills to calm McDonald down, or so it seemed. Except what he was really doing, according to the court testimony, was planting a mental suggestion. Quote, kill Thomas Patton. McDonald later claimed he tried to resist it. Oh, he really did. But his mind was not his own. So he took a gun, found Thomas Patton, and shot him dead. With a perfect shot. Too perfect, some said. He even claimed his aim had been improved by the hypnosis. A Manchurian candidate of sorts. Now, usually in these kinds of stories, the hypnotist is long gone. Or no one believes a word of it, but not this time. Anderson Gray, not McDonald, was sentenced to hang, charged with murder by hypnosis, and Thomas McDonald was fully acquitted. Declared innocent by reason of mind control. Not bad at all. This is one of the only known cases in American legal history where someone beat a murder rap because another man allegedly hacked their mind. It was either a chilling example of manipulation and power or the most creative legal defense ever successfully pulled off in a Kansas courtroom. Either way, it makes you wonder, what is the line between influence and control? And how safe are any of us really if someone else figures out the password to our brain? That one's interesting just because the guy literally
hanged.
Yeah, the guy literally hanged for it, and Thomas McDonald's like, you know.
I mean, let's hope that he really was responsible, because, my God, what if Thomas McDonald was actually waiting for an opportunity like this? Who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Well, folks, now we move on to the jewel of our story tonight, the jewel of our episode. We're going to meet a man named George Kinney. We got a lot to say about this guy. So let's rewind to 2011. The place is Northport, Florida. Kind of town where the high school football field doubles as the community social club, and everyone kind of knows each other, for better or worse. At the center of Northport High School was Principal George Kinney, a well-liked and respected man about town. The kind of administrator who remembered your name and maybe even your GPA as well. He was more than just an authority figure. He was trusted by students, by teachers and parents alike. So when 3 different students came to him with personal struggles, anxiety, insomnia, emotional distress, it didn't raise any eyebrows. He was the kind of principal who made time and listened to people's troubles. But here's the thing. This is where it all takes a turn for the unconventional. You see, George Kinney had a hobby. And no, it was not golf or woodworking or even pickleball at the local country club. No, Kinney practiced hypnosis. In fact, he had even been known to hypnotize students in the past to help with test anxiety, athletic performance, or even quitting smoking. This was Florida, after all. There's a certain tolerance for the unorthodox, but this time, things got too strange. And then, unfortunately, became tragic. Because within a span of a few weeks, all 3 students who had come to Kinney were dead. 3 suicides. 3 teenagers. All of whom had recently been hypnotized by their principal. Now, this is where I just wanted to put in a side note. I don't care how nice this guy is, and if he truly had good intentions, attempting to hypnotize students is creepy as f.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying that's what this is or anything, but I get groomy vibes from it. Like, groom. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's definitely a boundary thing, first of all, with your students. And second of all, if he knows about hypnosis, he probably knows about some of the history with hypnosis and that it can go wrong.
Yes. And even if it was innocent, and say none of them died, say none of that happened, say it was he innocently hypnotized him, and say it even worked for him, that is still, I think, crossing. That's to me, that just screams weird. I get red flags.
I agree. Very creepy.
Right. I mean, there's a school therapist or a school counselor for a reason. You know what I mean? Like, if they really are feeling sad, like, that should be the recourse. If they want hypnosis, the parents can set it up outside of school.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's that to me is just, because you have to think that probably not all the parents knew about it either. That, right. You know what I mean?
Probably not.
Now, to be clear, as I said, no one's suggesting that George Kinney had sinister intentions. As far as we know, he wasn't some clock-swinging Rasputin in a tie. He claimed his work with hypnotism was therapeutic and meant to be helpful and done with care and consent. But the facts were pretty darn damning. Parents, naturally, were outraged. Investigators asked, did he overstep his role? Did the hypnosis trigger something unintended? And how had this gone unregulated for so long? Eventually, Kinney was charged with multiple misdemeanors for practicing hypnosis without a license. He was forced to resign, his once sterling reputation now just a footnote in a case that left a community shaken. Because at the heart of it all were unsettling and unresolved questions. Can hypnosis kill? And also, why would this man once again think it's okay to do that to students? It would be one thing if this was a school-wide assembly where all the kids are there and they can raise their hand to volunteer to be hypnotized, like it's a show on a cruise ship. That's one thing. But you have to imagine this is behind closed doors, that's where it's like, okay, come on, this is weird. This is obviously, especially when you're dealing with things, serious issues like self-harm and depression. So nevertheless, here you got 3 kids, 3 tragedies, 1 trusted adult with a mind-bending skill and no idea where the ethical lines were drawn, when he certainly should have. And needless to say, this wasn't just a one-time thing. Old George Kinney wasn't just dabbling. He wasn't just curious about hypnosis. No, this was a man on a mission, a self-appointed mind healer. An unlicensed hypnotist operating right there in the halls of a public high school, in places like the band room, the locker room, even his office. Not once or even twice, Kinney allegedly had hypnotized over 75 students to help them focus, to help them sleep, to help them stop biting their nails or ease the dread of the upcoming algebra exam. He believed he was helping. He believed he had the power to make that difference. But when you're walking around with that kind of power and no license and no oversight, something's bound to go wrong, and it certainly did. In the spring of 2011, the 3 students, each of whom had recently undergone sessions with Kinney, all died. There was Wesley McKinley, a talented athlete and honor student who took his own life. Brittany Palumbo, a bright and well-loved senior, also died by her own hand. And Marcus Freeman, a promising football player, died in a car accident, so his wasn't necessarily suicide, after allegedly entering a self-hypnotic trance behind the wheel. 3 deaths, all in the wake of Kenny's therapeutic hypnosis. It's important to say there was no evidence that Kenny had malicious intent, as I said. There's no proof that he planted dark suggestions or coerced the students to harm themselves. But that's the thing with unchecked power. You don't have to be a villain to cause devastation. Sometimes all it takes is hubris, which I think is what we're dealing with here. Because hubris, and I thought about this as I was writing this script out, when you think of hubris, you think of pompous. But sometimes hubris can be hidden under good intentions. For example, what did he offer that the school counselor couldn't? Or some other kind of mental health professional? Or even a hypnotist would be fine if the parents of these kids approved. So what are we dealing with here? At some level, yes, it's hubris. Sometimes hubris can be subconscious. Hubris doesn't always mean you're pompous or a self-righteous prick. Sometimes it can be disguised as a belief that you understand the mind better than you really do. That you can fix what others can't. That you're the exception to the rules. Kenny had been warned repeatedly, and that's the other thing. He had been warned repeatedly by the district's director of high schools to stop that shit. Florida law explicitly forbade unlicensed hypnosis. But Kenny didn't stop until it was too late. And I just wanted to add how embarrassing and cringe as well for him. Obviously tragic, but also on top of all that, how fucking cringe. A grown fucking adult warned numerous times and of doing all things hypnosis. It's just not that hypnosis is dumb or anything. It's just it comes off so Dungeon Master, D&D. You know what I mean? It just comes off so cringe. And this tragedy, of course, shook the community. Grief turned to outrage. A promising educator became the focal point of a dark, spiraling mystery. And the question still lingers. Did Kenny hypnotizing those students lead directly to their death? Or had he simply pulled a thread on a tapestry or a sweater that was too tangled for him to understand, and as he kept pulling, before he knew it, everything had unraveled. Whatever the answer, 3 families were left with empty bedrooms and broken hearts. And in the quiet corridors of Northport High, no one is sleeping easy. What made it all so much more chilling was this. None of the 3 students showed signs of wanting to harm themselves. Wesley McKinley had been dreaming of graduation. Brittany Palumbo was making college plans. Marcus Freeman was in love and looking forward to football season. They weren't withdrawn. They weren't spiraling. They weren't making plans, or they weren't writing goodbyes, at least not yet. McKinley and Palumbo gone by their own hands, and Freeman killed in a car crash with no clear cause. There wasn't even the smallest hint of alcohol or drugs in any of these kids. No medical emergency, just a turn of the wheel. His girlfriend survived the crash. When she came to, this is interesting, she told the police something that really rattled them. She said that Marcus had a strange look on his face, like a vacant, trance-like look right before the car veered off the road. And then came the common thread. All 3 had recently been hypnotized, of course, by George Kenny, the popular, respected principal, the so-called mind healer. The man who had been warned to stop, and now the question wasn't just about whether hypnosis worked, it was about whether it could kill. Kenny was arrested, charged, and brought to trial. The defense claimed it was all a coincidence, that hypnosis can't make someone do something they don't want to do, that Kenny was just trying to help. But then, other students began to testify. One described going, quote, totally numb, unable to move or speak. Another claimed she lost all memory of the session and woke up an hour later with no idea where she was. A third said she walked home barefoot and had no idea she'd taken her shoes off. Now, side note, doesn't that sound a little bit like drugging to you? I don't know if that's what happened, but that sounds like someone who got drugged.
Yeah, you hear that a lot when people are drugged, that they just kind of black out for a period of time.
Yep. That to me, and I have no proof, obviously, I have no way of, it's just when I read that, my mind started screaming, drugged. Like these girls were drugged. And why would the girl's shoes be off in the first place? Who's to say more of her clothes weren't off before she left? Awful dark to think about, but that really shot the flare gun for me when I was going over everything. And these were not just stage tricks, folks. These weren't volunteers clucking like chickens, pretending to walk like a dinosaur like they do at I worked on cruise ships as an entertainer. I've seen Hypnosis, the fun, silly things that can happen. These were kids describing losing time, losing control, and losing themselves under the influence of their principal. It painted a disturbing picture. A trusted authority figure conducting unauthorized mind experiments on students without their full understanding of the risks. And now 3 young people were dead. No one could say for certain that hypnosis was the cause, but no one could rule it out either. Which leaves us with the one thing that always stays behind in cases like these: doubt. It's always the last person to leave the party. In every rumor about what really happened, George Kinney was sentenced to a year of probation and permanently lost his teaching certificate. But the real sentence belongs to the families who were left behind, to the classmates who still wonder if something supernatural or even worse, something criminal was to blame for what happened to their friends. And those of them who had been hypnotized by Kinney who didn't die, they're probably wondering what happened to me in those hours I can't recall. And to those of us who can't shake the feeling that the mind, when tampered with, can become a loaded weapon, especially in the wrong hands, one witness from this story had this to say: I was in this trance. I was told I wouldn't be able to find my room because all of the room numbers would be changed to Chinese. I was lost for about 20 to 25 minutes just walking around. I was seeing the Chinese lettering, the weird lines and all. He made a couple of the guys put lipstick on. Everybody thought it was funny because it was, teenagers putting lipstick on. In the end, the trail ended in a $600,000 wrongful death settlement. But there was not much evidence to convict Kinney of any wrongdoing. He was simply slapped with a misdemeanor charge of practicing hypnosis without a license, which resulted in 1 year of probation, after which he was allowed to retire from the school board on a full pension. Folks, I certainly believe in psychic ability. And I believe it manifests in many different ways. I believe it's something that's been around since humans, since all things. I think even to some degree, probably animals have it. This is not me being a naysayer. This last story I saved for last because this just to me sounded so fishy. Let's say his intentions were innocent and all that stuff. I mean, yes, the probation, obviously not a hearty enough sentence, but he'll also always be that fucking guy. That guy who did, so he'll live with that. So
he gets his own brand of karma in a way, we hope.
You're right. And
for at the very least being very irresponsible, because at the very least, that's what he was.
Right. You look at people throughout history, whether it's great politicians or great artists or something, and, you'll hear a story about a record and they'll be like, you know what? We said F you to the studio. We ended up doing this and it ended up becoming the biggest album of all time. Well, that's because those were special people with a special something.
And there's a million stories like that don't work out. They thought that the same thing and then they didn't have success.
AKA hubris. That's what this is. And like I said, hubris doesn't mean you're a pompous, smug prick. I mean, it can. But hubris, to some degree, like we said, you can not even be aware of it. the thought that of all the options those kids had available to them, he thought he was the one, like this sort of savior complex. It's just weird. But, you know, Gage, I got a list of names that I've got focused in my mind right now, and I'm sending thunderbolts of love at them right now.
Oh yeah, who's that?
Our top-tier Patreon subscribers. Of course, the Dream James Watkins, the Finnish Face Via Lungfist, the Madman Marcus Hall, the Tenacious Teresa Hackworth, the Heartbreak Kid Chris Hackworth, the oh-so-suave Sean Richardson, the Notorious Nicholas Barker, the Terrifying Taylor Lashmet, the Count of Cool Cameron Corliss, the Archduke of Attitude Adam Archer, the Sinister Sam Kiker, the Nightmare of New Zealand Noeline Vivilli, the Loathsome Johnny Love, the Carnivorous Kevin Bogey, the Killer Stud Carl Staub, the Firestarter Heather Carter, the Conqueror Christopher Damian Damaris, the Awfully Awesome Annie, the Murderous Maggie Leach, the Serve Sexy Sam Hackworth, the Evil Elizabeth Riley, Lauren Hellfire Hernandez Lopez, the Maniacal Laura Maynard, the Vicious Karen Van Buren, the Arch Nemesis Aaron Bird, the Sadistic Sergio Castillo, the Rapscallion Ryan Crum, the Beast Benjamin Huang, the Devilish Chris Doucette, the Psycho Sam, the Electric Emily Zhang, the Ghoulish Gert Hankum, the Renegade Corey Ramos, the Crazed Carlos, the Antagonist Andrew Park, the Monstrous Michaela Schur, the Witchy Wonder J.P. Weimer, the Freaky Ben Forsyth, the Barbaric Andrew Barry, the Mysterious Marcella, the Hellacious Cale Hoffman, and Pugblorb, the Poltergeist. Oh, it took it all out of me. All that psychic energy. Sending all that love. Watch, now something bad will happen to and they'll be like, this man sent his psychic vibes over the podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, of course, folks, if you want to be just like those fine folks, head on over to patreon.com/creepstreetpodcast for all sorts of goodies. Folks, we love you. We'll definitely in the future come back and do a Mind Killers 2 because there was other great stories. There was one like this Russian lady. Can't remember if it was World War II or the Cold War that like the Russian government had trained her. She could apparently kill with her mind. We'll definitely do a Mind Killers 2 sometime in the future for sure. But folks, we thank you. We love you. Check out Vaporverse on YouTube for everything Gage is doing. We're getting tons of new listeners. I had a few folks in Germany reach out to us with some episode suggestions that I really, really liked, and I'm going to try to get working on those. We thank you. We love you. Citizens of the Milky Way, my name is Dylan Hackworth.
And I'm Gage Hurley.
Good night and goodbye.